Hello students, today's video lecture is going to teach you about the structure of a typical vertebra. So I'm going to use my anatomy app to help you get started. Okay, so I have the anatomy app open and I've actually deleted the arms so they don't obstruct our view. So we're looking at the vertebral column, which we'll learn about next. But before we do, I'm going to pick a vertebra from the lower back area, and we're going to look about its orientation within the body. So as you can see, the vertebra has a really chunky part to it, and that chunky part of the bone faces forward or anteriorly. What we can also see is that there is a single piece of bone that projects backwards, and you can actually feel these like little nubs in the center of your back. And that projects posteriorly or backwards. So this direction is posterior. So that's the first thing to note, is that this chunky part of the vertebra, which is actually called the vertebral body, faces forward no matter what direction. Even if we look at it from the top, for example, if I was to delete all the rest of this and we look down on the top of it, it would still face forward. And this little spiny projection in the back would still face backwards or posteriorly. So let's head over to the worksheet and add that information. Okay, so let's start on this view actually. This is a side view and we call it a lateral view. But we really need to be a little bit more specific, since we can see on our app that there's actually two side views. There's this side and there's this side. So we're looking at this side, which happens to be the left side of the person. So we would go ahead and be more specific by saying it is a left lateral view. Lateral means side. And we're going to resurrect some of our directional terms. Remember, this is our little compass that tells us the anatomical directions. So if we imagine this on the bone, remember this way was front or anterior. So we're going to transition that over here. And this way with that one spiny projection was towards the back of the body or posteriorly. This way, as we can see, is towards the head. This way, towards the head and towards the feet. So the word that means towards the head is superior and inferior. And I'm going to actually write a little cheat of the words up here so you have that. Okay, so you can see I've put those terms here so you have a little definition. S for superior, meaning above or upwards towards the head. I, inferior, down towards the feet or below, and then A for anterior or front, P for posterior or back. That's really good to have that little reference there. So back to our diagram, we said this was towards the front, this was towards the back, and this is towards the head or superior. And then this one, I'll squeeze a little eye in there. It is easier if you do your compass off to the side. All right, so that's a left lateral view. This is an overhead view. So let's go back to our app and I'll highlight the one bone. And you kind of have to imagine that I'm going to tip the whole body forward. I'm going to keep that bone highlighted, but I'm going to tip this whole body forward. I'll zoom out so you can see. Notice I've deleted the arms. But I'm going to hide everything except that blue vertebra. And now you can see it looks like the one on our worksheet. Let me double check. Yep, just like it. Okay, so that is a top view or superior view. Let's figure out our compass. Okay, so basically we took this and we turned it and then looked at the top. So this chunky part is still in the front. So this way is still forward. So we're going to move our A to that spot. This way is still towards the back, so this will be P, posterior. Now, what we've done is we can't do a superior because it's coming out of the screen at us. An inferior is going into the screen. Remember how I tipped? If I bring everything else back, wow, we're looking at the top of the guy's head. Okay, so superior is like a direction we can't really draw. But what we can figure out is that this was one side of the body and this was the other. So the question is, what side of the body is this? Of this person's body, it is the right side of that person's body. So R for right, which makes this side L for left. Okay, so that's our basic orientation. Those are really the only two views that you would ever have, either a above view from above, superior view, or a lateral view. It might be a right lateral, in which case the whole bone would be flipped over this direction. Like, here's our left lateral. We could have a right lateral, okay? And then in that case, anterior would be this way, posterior would be this way. This way is still towards the head and towards the feet. Okay. So let's get started with the parts of the actual bone. And those are listed down here. So I'll give you a brief definition and then show you where it is up here and we'll color. All right, so the main part of the bone, this chunky part, as I've been calling it, is called the vertebral body. So the definition for the vertebral body is the largest part of the bone that gets stacked when you form the vertebral column. And actually, we're going to see that word body used again and again on a lot of bones because the body is always the largest part of the bone. So grab any color, whatever color you decide. I'm going to use green for my vertebral body. And let's come up to here and color the vertebral body green. It is sort of, it looks sort of cube-shaped from this view, but when we go to the superior view, you see it's actually kind of more oval-shaped. And when we get into the sections of the vertebral column, we'll notice the vertebral body actually changes size. The larger it is, the further down the column you are. Okay, so this part right here is the vertebral body. Next on our list of definitions is the vertebral arch. And just as the name implies, it is an archway of bone off of the vertebral body, let's go to this view, that creates an opening here. So it might actually be easier to color first and then add in our definition. So I'm going to draw almost like a little, kind of like a house structure here. And it's all of this section, excluding any kind of like projections or sticky outy parts on the bone. This is an archway. Remember that actually arches out posteriorly, and it forms the hole inside the bone. So vertebral arch, definition. I put archway of bone creating an opening. Now, every single vertebra has that opening in it. It doesn't matter if I look at the lower back section, you can see there's an opening, or if I choose one from the middle of the back, it still has that hole in it. Or even if I choose, let's say, the very top vertebra, the very first one, still has a hole in it. So every single vertebra has that hole in it, and the spinal cord is inside of that opening. So I'm going to add my nervous system. You can see all the nerves. And I'm going to get really close. Actually, let me go a little bit maybe further down so you can see it a little better. And I'm actually going to delete one of these bones so you can see. And go a little bit further up. All right, you see that yellow structure here? That's the spinal cord. And if we follow it up, we can see that it's actually situated. Let me delete this one. We can see that it's in the hole. Oh, look through there. In the hole of the bone. All right, back to our notes. So what can we continue? Archway of bone creating an opening for the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is actually nervous tissue that's extending out of the brain and down, kind of like an extension cord. Okay, so that's the vertebral arch. Now, the hole itself is called the vertebral foramen. So I'm just going to say this is the hole or opening. Well, that's what the word foramen means, hole or opening, in the vertebrae. By the way, if you see vertebra without the E, it's one, and if you put an E, it's more than one. So an opening in the vertebra for the spinal cord. It's called the vertebral foramen. And I'm not going to color that because sometimes when you color a hole, it makes it look like a thing instead of an opening. Now, can I see that here? No, this is a side view. But I can definitely see it here. So that is the vertebral foramen. And a foramen is a hole in bone. We're going to see that word again too, foramen. Okay, what is next? Transverse processes. I'll show you and then we'll write our definition. Transverse processes. Trans means across. So these are projections that point out to the left and to the right. So let's go up there and see if we can find any projections that point out to the left and the right. By the way, the word process, notice, process, 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 process. Normally, the word process would mean like a series of events. In bone anatomy, the word process is very commonly used, and it means a bony projection, aka a sticky outy part. Sticky outy is a word, right? Okay, so that's really important because we're going to see that a lot. Really important definition there. Okay, so we're looking for our transverse processes, and those are going to stick out to the left and right. Well, where's the left and the right? This way and this way. So right off of the vertebral arch is this projection and this projection, and those are the transverse processes. Easy peasy. Now, we've sort of been ignoring this diagram for a little bit, mostly because it's really difficult to tell where the vertebral arch is. You can see it here, but then kind of lose sight of it. The transverse process is a little tricky, so I want to go back to the app. Let's grab an individual bone and zoom in. All right, so this is our superior view, right? And right here and right here are the transverse processes. They point out to the left and to the right of the body. Okay, watch this. Keep your eye on this piece right here while I turn. Watch it. Turning, 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 turning. And we almost disappear completely. There it is, right here. And when we turn to the side, it almost totally disappears. So this little nub, which we know is pointing out of the page at us, is the transverse process. Let's see if we can find this on our worksheet. Oh, they did a much better job here. It's here. That's our transverse process, pointing out of the page, and the other one would be pointing into the page. Okay, so there's two of those. Should probably make a note that there are two of those. Spinous process, there's only one. And let's do the coloring first. I think that works. I gotta get a different color. Spinous process, there's a single projection. This one points towards the back of the body. So backwards is posterior. That's going to be this right here. Spinous process. You can feel this in the back of in the midline of your back. So there, and then also when we turn it to the side, we can see it's actually kind of a big piece. Spinous process. So for a definition, one projection that points posteriorly, and remember, up in the corner, you have your little cheat sheet. That means back. So it's a single projection that points posteriorly. Okay, we've got a lot of this done. Okay, what do we have left? This looks like it's mostly done, except we've got this weirdo thing right here. This a little lacking. So let's go back to our app and I'll show you the last two. They're similar. All right, so transverse process, transverse process. Here's the spinous process. And if I throw all my vertebrae back in there, you'll notice that every single one of these points, there, those are all lined up nice and orderly right along the midline of the back, and that's the spinous process. Here, transverse, transverse. Okay, now what do we have left? We have two processes that are called superior and inferior. And if we take a look at our side view, we know that superior is this direction. Oops. And inferior is this direction. So do we see any projections that point that way? I do. And actually, if I turn and twist, I see two superior projections and two inferior projections. But it's not enough to just call those a superior process or an inferior process because these are special. So now we can see these are special because what's their purpose? They're making a joint with another bone, with another vertebra. That's where they touch each other. Because the vertebral body doesn't actually touch the next vertebral body. There's an intervertebral disc, which we'll learn about later. But these parts form joints. So the joints between the vertebrae are formed by these upper superior and lower inferior projections. For that reason, it is not enough just to call them a superior and inferior. Look at this word here. Articular means that it forms a joint. Okay, so we have to add that in for both. So then our definition becomes two upward superior facing projections, processes, that form a joint with what? With the vertebra above. Okay, the next one up. And then almost the exact same definition down here. The only thing that we're going to change is what? Two, not upward, downward facing projections that form a joint, well, technically two, one on one side and one on the other, right? With the vertebra not above, they point down, so they're going to make a joint with the vertebra below. Okay, let's color in our superior articular process. We'll come up to our side view. This one points upward. Okay, and I'm actually going to draw in an arrow just to be like kind of obnoxious about it. See, that one goes up. And this one faces down. Now, where's this one on this view? Let's take a look at our app. Okay, so here's our superior articular process. We're going to watch that. Watch this piece. There should be two of them as I turn. Where'd it go? See that? That right there And there are the superior articular processes. We're looking down from the top now, so they're coming out of the screen at us. So up here, this and this, there we go. I'm coloring in my two superior articular processes. So these orange are the same. Then the inferior ones will get a different color. And here is the inferior. And actually, this would have cartilage on it, which is kind of why that was different colored, because it forms a joint. Okay, so there's the inferior. Where's the inferior here? Let's take a look in our app. Those are the superiors. If I turn this to the side again, here's my inferior. If I twist a little bit, you can see there's the two here and here. But when I turn it to look from the top, where are they? They're underneath. So we cannot see the inferior articular processes from a superior view. You will never get an inferior view, by the way. Nobody ever shows the bone from underneath. They don't do that. So the only way we're going to see that inferior articular process is from a side view. Okay, there you have it, the components or structure of a typical vertebra.